famous Tom Waits tune called I Don't Want to Grow Up. It's like a D, A, that repeats. There it goes. 6, 2, 4, 5. It repeats that.
Oh, nice. Sweet. Well, dude, thanks for coming over today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So, this is my buddy, Zach. Zach, how about you give a little intro about yourself?
My name is Zach Bingham. I just play guitar in bands around Columbia. Sometimes I lead my own band playing the blues. I also work at a recording studio called the Jam Room as an engineer, and sometimes as a session player over there.
Yeah.
That's it.
A lot of the times, it feels like. How'd you get into guitar? When did you first pick it up?
Man, I was 6 years old, and I heard an Elvis song called Jailhouse Rock, you know. That one right there. And my parents bought me a guitar. And I've been playing it ever since. So.
That's awesome. So what I thought I would do with this whole episode is kind of start a series where I bring in my guitar playing friends and talk about, you know, not only just like technique. Basically, this is like an opportunity to just be a guitar nerd and talk about, hey, what makes a great guitarist, and not just talk about from like technical details, but also kind of like giving advice to people out there who are trying to get better. Because that's a lot of my audience is they're always learning about either, you know, talking about tone of how to build rigs to how to actually practice guitar and study music. So be prepared to get a little nerdy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
So I guess we'll start off with, who are some of your biggest influences?
Man, lately I've been really into guys like Chris Whitley, who's kind of like an abstract blues player, I think is the best way to describe him. But usually I spend a lot of time listening to just kind of classic things from Stax and, you know, Memphis and old Nashville records and stuff like that. So I guess the answer to that would be studio guys. I really love the studio guy thing, you know. Michael Landau, I really love Michael Landau. Guys like Reggie Young, you know, he's on all those records out of Nashville from the 60s and 70s and stuff like that.
what I love about talking about you is that I feel like I know guitar players, and then you and I will have a conversation. I'm like, I don't know any of these guys.
Well, yeah, my thing is I like the behind the scenes guys, right? Like I like being behind the scenes myself. I'm pretty shy, you know. And so for me, I sort of always idolize those guys. You see their names on the liner notes of your favorite records, and you wonder who they are. And if if, like me, you listen to a lot of those old records and you see the same names over and over again, you start to realize, hey man, all these different artists and bands are really composed of a handful of guys that I really like, you know. I suppose one of the most famous ones that people might know would be like Tommy Tedesco from the Wrecking Crew. You know, even Barney Kessel, an old jazz guitarist, he played with the Wrecking Crew. So just, guys like that, I really think they're fascinating. One of my favorites that everybody probably knows now from his YouTube series is Tom Bukovac.
Oh yeah.
So, Tom Bukovac is
you put me on to him.
Well, I'm so grateful that he started doing the YouTube thing. Before that, he started doing that during the pandemic, and before that, he had like zero content anywhere. Like, he didn't even give interviews, and I was so just dying for him to reveal anything about himself. And then he started doing the YouTube thing, and I was like, yeah, that's great. So I love watching his channel for sure.
That's awesome. And you actually went to school for jazz, didn't you?
Yeah, man. So I studied at UNT for a little bit, University of North Texas, and then kind of finished up at USC, South Carolina.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know you went to USC.
Yeah, studied with Burt Ligon over there. I think he's retired now, but he was kind of the guy that opened my eyes to a lot of the ways that you can approach learning and playing jazz, especially, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are I don't know. Whenever it comes to like, one of my favorite things about sitting in with you is you're just like vast repertoire of music that you know. Like, it's ridiculous. How would you recommend someone go about building that up? I mean, I know obviously it's a ton of time, but
yeah, I think I think about that a lot, because in my younger days I just learned songs. When you're a kid and you're learning the guitar, you're not really thinking about it as learning the guitar. You're thinking about it like learning songs, or at least I did. You learn your favorite songs, and then if you're like me, at some point you get into the more kind of technical-minded music like jazz and heavy metal and stuff, and then you begin to focus on those things. How can I improve my technique, or what's the next cool thing that I can learn? And then on the other side of that bell curve, you start learning songs again, or at least I do. So for me, the most important thing is learning songs, and I try to focus on that more than anything else. So in other words, instead of sitting and like mindlessly practicing scales or finger exercises anymore, I really only play when I have a song that I'm trying to learn. And that can be like a jazz chord melody or a blues song that I'm trying to sing, even though I'm not a great singer. I try to, or like a riff that I really find fascinating. I think knowing a million guitar riffs is just as good as knowing chords and stuff. So I'll sit and a good example of that might be "Oh Well," the old Fleetwood Mac Peter Green riff. It's one of those riffs I've heard my whole life, and then when you sit down and finally learn it, it's very satisfying. It's like a... Obviously, I haven't played it in a while, but you hear stuff like that, and you're like, man, that's cool. I got to learn that. Or it could be like an old pop song. Like lately, I've been really into the old Carol Kay thing, "Will You Love Me Tomorrow?" That tune.
No. That's our relationship.
So something like that, I'll take and arrange it on the guitar. And I think by doing that, you're accomplishing a lot of things. One, you're learning a song, so you have something to play when you put a guitar in your hands, which is always important. No one wants to hear noodling, or at least I don't. And then two, you're learning technique, so you have to figure out the technical challenges of getting that under your fingers. So you have a reason to learn technique, I guess. What's the old philosophical saying? The obstacle is the way.
Oh, yeah.
The song,
that's a great book, too. I don't know if you've read it. Ryan Holiday.
I don't think I have,
you
but I know
you
the
would
quote.
dig it. Yeah.
So for me, the song is the obstacle, and everything you do in service of learning the song will improve you as a player. That's the bottom line. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about with the peak of like understanding, because I feel like right now I went from like learning a bunch of songs to like now I'm getting more into like the technique. Like I was, the book that I sent you, the Pat Martino, I think is his name.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, and also I love songwriting. That's where I'm like really trying to improve lately. And I guess that's a great segue because I sat in the studio with you last week, and it was fun seeing someone give you a chord sheet, and then you really make the song come alive. That was completely different than the demo.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you is, how do you fuse the two between like learning, being song driven for technique, and then also using that to drive songwriting?
Well, so I'm not a songwriter. I've tried. Every few years I'll get the itch to kind of sit down and write my own music or whatever, but I guess what you're talking about is like writing a part for a song that somebody shows you, which I really love to do. It's like my favorite thing, and it could be like a studio session like you were talking about, or it could be a live gig. Somebody needs a guitar for a live gig or whatever. And for me, it goes back to admiring the studio cats. You listen to enough music, and all these kind of idiomatic things for whatever genre you're listening to kind of get stuck in your brain. And when it comes time to use them, you'd be surprised how quickly they come out. You know what I mean? So I think I even remember. So this guy had a song we were playing in the key of G, and his demo was just, him strumming a G chord.
Yep.
And he said, hey man, I need some kind of fancy intro or something like that to go with it. So all I did was play this little thing that's like right out of the chords.
Yeah.
It's really simple. It sounds like something that you could hear on any record from any decade.
And it served the song.
And it serves the song, which is really, really important. If you record yourself a lot and kind of listen back, you'll notice that the simpler things kind of jump out more than the more complicated things.
Yeah.
Which is so hard for guitarists, especially to grasp, because guitar lends itself so well to just like noodling and
mindless noodle
and stuff like that. So it really pays to kind of self-edit and kind of prune things down so that they speak more clearly on records, so to speak. So
yeah, I've been studying some guys who are very like melodic instrumentalists. They may not do all the razzle and dazzle, but dang, the notes that they choose, it sounds almost like a vocalist. Like it sounds like their guitar is singing. And a lot of the times when you listen to them, it's not the flashy 5 million notes per second.
Right.
I mean, look at B.B. King. B.B. King is an excellent example.
Yeah,
he didn't play everything, but boy, he sat in that. Yeah, exactly. But what's also crazy is that if you listen to a record and you don't hear the vocalist, you know B.B. King's sound instantly.
Oh yeah, that's another thing I think about a lot. How many guitarists can you name is like with one note? BB's one of them. I think
Stevie Ray Vaughan, I'd say for me.
Stevie Ray Vaughan has a very noticeable or recognizable tone. Santana, I would put on that list. It doesn't matter the decade, 60s, 70s, on up to now. One note, it's Carlos Santana.
Clapton, I think, for me.
Yeah, I could see that. Trying to think who else has that kind of just instantly recognizable sound.
Ed King.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed King, especially his Strat days. Well, I guess most of his records are Strats, but...
Well, speaking of like Southern rock dudes like Dickie Betts.
Yeah.
Man, Dickie has a sound, And I know, you know, from that band, Dwayne is the more revered of the two generally. And Dwayne had a sound too, but man, I can pick Dickie out immediately. You know, very, very,
Dang.
very unique sound. So, yeah, trying to emulate a human voice. Because think about it, you know, 80% of what we're going to do is to back up a singer, right? And so if you think about it, if you're trying to craft something that's like memorable for the listener, no matter what the genre is, then when the singer's not singing, you want what you're playing to kind of take over that lead singer's space.
Yeah.
And you know, a lead singer can't do the
Yeah.
you can't do that with your voice. so you know, the guitar shouldn't do that either. In those situations, there are certain situations where you might want to do that. Personally, I don't have the technique for it.
You know, you say that.
I mean,
I've seen you at the cabin. You're like, yeah, I don't know. I played you a Chan song, and all of a sudden you just start ripping. I'm like, what? Because remember, we turned that into a whole discussion of like, how are you approaching this? And you're like, I don't know. I just hear it.
Right. Well, I guess that's the bottom line of what we're talking about here today is you got to play what you hear. So if you hear that, then play it. You know, I don't sit and purposely work on technique anymore. I used to when I was younger. And part of that is you know, we were just having this discussion off camera. I'm getting older and feeling a lot of pain, you know, getting carpal tunnel and arthritis and having to go down to lighter strings and stuff like that. And at my age, I don't have any interest in sitting around trying to learn how to do that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I definitely did. You know, I would sit and do the old, how fast can I get my picking going and stuff like that. And it paid off. That's something I've noticed is that if you do that stuff when you're young and full of energy, you'll have it in the tank as you age. And that's what you really want. If you're out there trying to learn guitar and think you might want to do it for a lifetime at any sort of level, then work like crazy, work your ass off, especially when you're first starting out, and then you can kind of coast on some of the things that you build as your foundation. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, because life gets in the way. As you get older, life gets in the way, and you may go days, you know, without being able to really practice. You know, I try to play every day, but sitting down and actually learn something new can be a challenge as you get older. So you want to have that foundation in place. Definitely, that's for sure.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with someone last week, and we were discussing, I think it was actually my professor, we were talking, jumping back into like songwriting and how you approach songs. Do you think that for you, whenever you're sitting in the studio, is your melody driving harmony, or is your harmony driving melody? How do you think about it?
Well, so in most studio sessions, the songwriter or whoever I'm playing for will have the harmony already because, you know, they'll come in with like the chords and the words and their own melody. So in that case, all I have to do is fit in some kind of melody. So like if you know, let's just goof around like with a couple of chords here. Yeah.
I'm just enough.
So in that little instance of just improvising, I'm trying to make every single phrase as singable and memorable and as simple as possible. And so the same mentality applies to writing parts for a singer-songwriter or whatever you've been hired to do. And if you just retain that mentality, whether you're writing parts in the studio or soloing on a live gig or whatever it might be, then you're always going to come out on top, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. You know, I want things I can remember and sing, and I have a terrible memory, so it helps if it's really simple, you know.
Yeah, I feel that. I'll switch gears for a little bit.
Sure.
Let's talk about gear. Let's say that because there's gonna be a bunch of gear nerds watching.
this 80% of playing guitar is like lusting over all the gear. That's for
Absolutely. So let's say I invite you to come sit in on a blues gig.
Sure.
What are you gonna grab? What are you thinking for your decision? And also talk about like your string gauge and pick, so on and so forth.
Okay, well, let's start with that last question first. So, like I just mentioned, I use very light strings, and it's actually something I should have been doing all along. When I first started, playing jazz and all that stuff, the general mindset is you have to use heavier strings for that, like 11s and 12s and flat wound strings and all this stuff. And I did that for a while, but what happened was I started to get, carpal tunnel and kind of sore tendons in my hand and stuff like that. And I also realized my touch is so light for some reason that I can't really draw the tone out of strings like that. So nowadays I'm really content using as light strings as I can get away with. So for instance, on this acoustic guitar, these are 10s, which most acoustic players would, that's blasphemy, right? We gotta use 13s, man. But these are 10s, they're really, really light. But to me, they're easy to play, and they sound right on the guitar. I can play them in tune and they sound great.
Real quick before you change, what is this guitar?
Oh yeah, so this is a 1950 Gibson LG1, and it's been refinished. So if you ever go shopping for one of these are a great deal on vintage Gibson acoustics. If you don't want a spring for like a J45 or Hummingbird or something like that. This one's been refinished. If you ever search for these, they're mostly the dark tobacco sunburst. And there's also an LG0, which has a solid mahogany top with like no finish, I think, or clear finish. And then there's the 1, which is this one, and there's a 2, and I think there's a 3. So the difference between the 0 and 1 and the 2 and the 3 is the bracing and the top. So this has ladder bracing, and the 2 and the 3 I think are X braced.
Okay.
I think this is designed for like a cheaper entry level guitar at the time, but I like it because it's not too big. It records really well because of its size. Yeah. So I like the smaller acoustic, body size. I've had dreadnoughts in the past, and I just couldn't deal with them. It's the same approach that I use for strings and stuff. It's like I can't deal with the big old huge guitar. I have no need. I'm not a bluegrass guy, so those guitars don't work for me, personally. And then as far as picks and stuff, I like as thin a pick as I can get, so most of the times it's like a medium. This is a medium. And I think this idea has become more popularized since the spread of information on the internet, but like a lot of players I mentioned earlier, I use the blunt end of the pick mostly.
Yeah, because of you, I have like a pick identity crisis right now after the cabin trip.
Oh yeah.
Because we were jamming, doing an acoustic jam, and I was like, dude, how are you? The sound, it just sounded so smooth. It didn't sound very, you didn't really hear a lot of the pick, but you still got a lot of the good volume.
Right, and that's something if you try this experiment, take any regular pick and kind of use the tip versus you can really hear the difference. But the advantage to that is now if I want that other sound, I've got it, So if, let's say I'm playing. If I want to thin the sound out, then I can use the tip, or if I have to play something with more like chuggy,
Yeah.
like gainy stuff, then I'll use the tip for that. So it just kind of adds a level of versatility without having to change a pedal or something like that. And I'll also use my fingers a lot too, you know, palm the pick and kind of do. Or
Do you grow your nails out?
nah, I used to.
Dude, that feels so gross. Look at this thing.
It's tough, yeah.
I started going through a finger picking course, and everybody swears by it, and I'm like,
Oh yeah. A lot of my favorite players do. You know, I love Pat Metheny, and he uses his nails a lot. Brent Mason uses his
he's a
nails.
beast.
So I was really into Lenny Bro. Man, he used nothing but his nails and a thumb pick, I think. But it just doesn't work for me. You know, that's not my style. Speaking of style, you asked about like a blues gig or something like that. So, you know, for electric stuff, I really love just kind of basic classic designs. Telecasters, Stratocasters, Les Pauls, SGs. I got to have one of each of those at all times, basically. You know, just in case I get called for a gig that requires any one of those things, I've got it. You know, I've got a arch top, an old Guild that I'll use for jazz gigs. You know, I've got some weird things like a baritone. You know, in case I ever need that.
oh, do you? What?
Yeah, it's
I've
cool.
never seen the baritone.
It's sweet, man. It's a Gretsch baritone. Most people, you know, into the classic baritone thing will use the Dan Electro. And I do have a Dan Electro also. I love that thing. It's a U2 with lipstick pickups.
Oh, sick. Those things look so cool.
It sounds amazing. It's really, really cool sound. But my baritone is a Gretsch, which is really fun. Get to use that in the studio a lot. That's mostly where that shines.
What's that tuned in? What do you keep yours in?
So there's two kind of tunings that most people will do. One of them, they'll have the lowest string as a B. You know, so like a, what's that, like a fifth below.
Yeah, it's like 7
regular
string.
guitar. Yeah, exactly. And then the other tuning is people will drop that down a whole step, and so the lowest string will be an A. So we'll go like A, D. So I'll just change the tuning depending on whatever song it is.
Yeah.
You know. And actually that guitar lives at the jam room. I just leave it there, so it gets used by a lot of people, and Lord knows what tuning it's ever. People pick it up and like, oh, this is awesome, and then they use it on the records. So yeah, I have an old Tysco, which is really fun. You know, if you're into Rycooter, you got to get an old Tysco with the weird pickups. It was like $100 on Craigslist.
Dang.
So I suggest everybody go out right now and buy a Tysco, even if you never think you're going to use it. Just you should own one.
They look so quirky.
They're very strange. They've got a lot of switches for pickup selection, and the pickups are really microphonic. So, you know, if you use any kind of amount of gain, they'll squeal and stuff. But they're so awesome. You know, sometimes you need that, especially if you record a lot and you need an extra layer of something, some kind of texture, something different. You know, pick up the Tysco. It's awesome sounding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like to have, as far as gear goes, one of everything.
One of everything? Yeah. I understand.
Let's try. Drives the gear list. Yeah, you got the same problem as me.
But what I tell Jess, because Jess laughs at me. I grew up riding horses, believe it or not.
Oh.
And what I tell her is that, like, each guitar is like a different horse. Like, you can have 10 horses that are the same breed, and all 10 of them are going to ride differently. And I think it's the same with guitar. Each one, I mean, obviously, we're not riding it, but the way that it makes me play and approach note choicing, especially when songwriting.
Yeah.
Because that's mostly where I live, is right here trying to put something together, composition-wise. And the way that I approach playing a Telecaster is way different than the way I would approach playing a Strat, which is different from a Les Paul and completely different from my 8-string.
Yeah.
I still haven't figured that one out, but...
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like whatever guitar you've got in your hands informs what you should play.
Yeah.
I think. That's the way I think. I envy guys that have like one guitar. You know, Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of romanticized that because he's got the one guitar that he played.
Whoa, do you not have a number one?
No, not really. I'm not sentimentally attached to anything in particular. and it's precisely because being, trying to be versatile is like, if I'm obsessed with one kind of guitar, and somebody, like, let's say it's a Stratocaster. I like Stratocasters. I've got a couple of them, and I used to think of myself, oh, I'm a Strat guy, but everybody thinks that, right? Everybody thinks they're a Strat guy, right? And I'm a Hendrix freak, so I was like, I'm a Strat guy. So I would just play Strats no matter what. And then I realized it's not always the right tool for the job. You show up to a session or a gig and you need a Les Paul for the gig, or you need a Telecaster. Mm-hmm. Telecaster has a really distinct sound. Sometimes you need that sound, So whatever you've got in your hands at the time can kind of inspire and inform what you're trying to do.
Well, that idea, you're saying it, whatever the gig calls, for some people that might be, a new concept of like, I only have one nice guitar. So in your mind, say that I'm saying, hey man, I got a country gig. Obviously, like most people would think a Telecaster, but in what instance would you be like, actually, I might need to bring my my Les Paul or my Strat? What makes that decision for you in your mind?
Well, so that's another a really excellent question, because if you look at the early days of Nashville country, those guys were all playing Gibsons, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were playing the fancy 345s and the big old like 275s like Scotty Moore and stuff. So even the Gibson Birdland, named after Hank Garland and Charlie Bird, right? So the telly thing didn't come into country until way later.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of amazing to think about. So yeah, it's like...
It really wasn't a Nashville thing. It was a California thing. It was a Bakersville thing.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean...
Because at the time, this was before Nashville dominated the country music scene, when Bakersville was still kind of relevant.
There's quite a few country scenes. Bakersfield, I remember hearing that at one point before Nashville exploded, like Atlanta was supposedly that place for that kind of stuff. So yeah, Fender coming out of California in the 50s, that's where most of that stuff was kind of battle tested and honed, if you will. But yeah, it's like the gig is country gig. Your first thought is, oh, I need my Telecaster, but not always. So sometimes it's best to break convention or whatever. So I'm not saying you should always do the expected or typical thing with guitars. What I am saying is that doing this the way I do it, I think of it as a service industry.
Yeah.
So if I get a call from a country singer, hey, I need some guitar, the Telecaster is probably the right choice, not only because of the sound, but also because of the vibe and the look. You show up and you play differently because of what you're holding, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
If I showed up with like a Jackson Flying V or something, I might be able to play country licks on that, but they might fire me for looking stupid on stage.
Yeah. I think it's like country is like really the biggest area I've experienced in it. For me, it depends on the artist too, because it depends. Am I the only guitar player? If so, sometimes the telly might be a little too thin, and that might be where, like, honestly, like, I wish I had a 335. I want a 335 so bad, but besides the point.
Yeah.
Or like a PRS fit, but the PRS is only because I can do the Strat and the telly thing in kind of one instrument.
Yeah, so we were talking about having one instrument. When I first really got serious about playing, like seriously, I had one guitar, and it was a super fancy guitar. It was a Tom Anderson that had like all sorts of, coils splitting and stuff. And that was my mentality then. Oh, I can do everything with this one guitar,
Yeah.
And I did for a while, and it worked and everything. But after a while, I started getting hired for all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, why not have, the right, the most appropriate tool for the job, I mean, that guitar could do everything technically, but it's kind of fun saying, oh, what's tonight? Tonight's the jazz gig, better grab the arch top. Or what's tonight? the rock gig, let's bring the Strat or whatever it is. It's fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love
fun.
like don't get me wrong, I have my number one guitar. She's not in here because she's a case princess. When I'm done playing her, her name's Amanda. You've seen her. It's my Les Paul.
Yeah, Les Paul.
She stays in her case next to my bed because I put it on a pedestal. But like the gig you invited me out to last Friday, I played my headless telly.
Oh yeah.
It's fun just to grab something different. But the only guitar I haven't played live is a Strat. It's because of the tremolo system. It scares me. Well, the Ultra Lux I have now is stable. But
So I love Strats, and I spent a lot of time only playing Strats. Like I said, I thought, oh, I'm a Strat guy. Let's see here. So there's a couple of ways to set up the trim for those that don't know what we're talking about here. So a lot of guys are afraid that if you break a string or use the trim, the guitar is going to go out of tune. And like that's not too bad. There's several ways to set up a Strat trim to kind of mitigate those issues. So if you use it a lot, it kind of pays to have it floating a little bit. It'll actually stay in tune better because it's designed to do that. Most of the time,
red one's floating.
The red one floats.
Yeah. This one is there's something going on. I think the saddles. That's an '84 Strat. Yeah. Something's going on with the saddles, and I can't. Yeah, it just makes you a little nervous. I can't get it to float with low enough action.
Yeah.
But on this one, this is the first Strat that I've had set up that stays in tune, always in tune. But for a lot of times in the gigs, I gotta go in between drop tuning or standard.
Right. So I used to float mine exactly like this because I was really into another studio guy, Carl Verheyen, and he's like a Strat devotee, and he always floats his trims. So I used to have my Strats like that, so you can use the bar all the time, which I really like, and it will stay in tune better that way. It's designed to do that. I think what happens with Strat players is they put the plate flat on the guitar, and then they use the bar. And when you do that, the saddles kind of slip around, and the string never comes right back to where it was supposed to be, and it goes out of tune. And then they're like, "Oh, this sucks. I don't like this." But you can finesse it. It just takes a little.
That's the first one I've ever had that I would say is stable. I would be comfortable playing that live. The only trade-off is that I can't drop tune. So if I bring that out and I'm playing, because with Ethan, he played in D standard, so my guitars were jumping between D standard and drop C. And that's what I love coming from the Gibson world, is everything's fixed tail, so I don't have to worry about it. But on a Strat, do you prefer a Strat in E standard, E flat, or do you think?
I think they sound awesome tuned down to E flat, but I keep all my guitars in standard because it's very rare that I need to have an E flat guitar. But if I do, that's another reason to have lots of guitars, is sometimes I have had gigs where it's like I need the guitar in E flat or one in drop D, and I'll just bring 2 or 3 guitars all tuned differently.
Yeah.
Strats, lots of famous Strat players tuned down. Hendrix towards the end of his life, Stevie Ray Vaughan, obviously. Eddie Van Halen, even though it's like a super Strat, tuned down a half step, it gives it a different throaty kind of sound that we all love, and that's, I think you get a lot of that by tuning down,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. Well, I got I don't want to eat up your whole day, but I got two last questions for you. One, he laughs at me because I'm a big digital guy, and he says never, right?
Never.
You think tube only, and most of my following follows me because of that Soulmaster Pro. So I guess my question to you is, why do you think analog is still king? Do you see the value in digital, just decide it's not for me, or what are your thoughts on analog versus digital, I guess?
I do see the value in it, that's for sure. I never want to close my mind off to anything.
Oh, we got it on YouTube. Documented.
Yeah. I like to think of myself as very open-minded about everything. Music, gear, other things in life and in the world. So I'll never say never. You know, and my mind can be changed. If I ever say that I don't like something, just take it as a challenge.
Good, because I did.
Yeah. Yeah. But for me, I've actually had a few, back in the old days, the Stone Age, I've had a few Line 6 amps that I used live, and they were okay, but there was always some kind of shortcoming, either in the feel or the sound, or just being able to get loud enough and still sound the way that I want it to. I also really like the interactivity of tube amps. So, for instance, as you turn them up, the way they sound and respond to your guitar changes, and that's really fun for me.
Yeah.
And it's another reason, not only guitars, but you should own a lot of amps too.
Yeah.
See, that was why Leo Fender was a genius, man. He made amps in all different sizes. So you got to have a Princeton, you got to have a Deluxe, you got to have a Super. You know, you got to have all the different size Fender amps. You know.
Oh, so you're a Fender tube amp guy mostly?
I got every size. You know, I love Marshalls and Voxes too, and have those. But Fender is convenient because it's like, just like we were talking about what guitar to bring. You can say, oh, tonight's gig is I'm playing jazz in the corner of an Italian restaurant. Well, I'm going to bring a Princeton. It's tiny and it fits in the corner with me, you know. And then the next night is like, well, I'm playing blues in a medium-sized club with no PA system. The Deluxe Reverb, you know, turn it up and it's loud enough and it feels good to play. And, you know, you can scale Fender amps to the situation, which is one of the reasons I like them. You know, beyond that, you know, the big ones, like I used to have a Showman, the 80-watt Fender thing, and I got that because I was such a Dick Dale fan. If you know Dick Dale, I saw him live in Spartanburg, South Carolina, playing 2 blonde Showmans. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Super loud, just unbelievably loud. So I got a blackface 66 Showman. It's gone now. I wish I had it back. But it was just so freaking loud, you know.
Yeah.
I could only use it like twice a year on, you know, outdoor festivals or something like that. So, you know, that was a cool amp.
Yeah. Well, I lied to you. I actually have 2 more questions. And I'll stop picking on you.
For sure.
So I got a buddy. His name is Tyler. He's also a Full Sail student. That's how we met.
Cool.
Actually through YouTube.
Sweet.
And he wants to get into, obviously he's a music production student, wants to get into studio work, but he's not a studio musician. What would be your advice for someone who wants to get involved in a local studio but doesn't know where to start?
So, whether it's working in the studio as an engineer or a session musician, the answer is kind of the same. And that's just, you kind of have to hang around and be seen and be on everybody's radar and be prepared. I'm really, really lucky and grateful that I am able to do the things that I do with music. And I'm very well aware that there's a lot of people that have the same question. How do I get into this? How do I, you know, you can't go down to the music factory and apply for your, you know, your job there. This business, like most others, I guess, is really about personal relationships, networking, and connecting that way. So if you want to do it, you know, be prepared as far as your technical abilities go, but then spend most of your time pounding the pavement, meeting people, meeting everyone that you can, you know, and then adhering to the other golden rules like be cool, be nice, you know, be courteous, be professional. Oh my God, man. You have no idea how many people don't get that part right. You know, what I mean by that is show up early to everything, be prepared for whatever it is that you're asked to do, be courteous to the people that you're working with. Professionalism will go a long way. You know, your deficit in skills can be made up over time, but professionalism has to be there from day one, or you'll never get your foot in the door. And that's, you know, that's a huge part of it. But yeah, I would say find a local studio or find out who's working in those studios and just meet them. be around them, ask them questions. Because one day they might say, "Hey man, I got the flu. Can you like come down here and take over for me?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, you better be ready, and you better be on good terms with that person,
And to back up what Zach is saying here, I mean, dude, I moved to Columbia 2 years ago, didn't know anybody.
Oh, yeah.
And then the way I met Zach is there was, I called Rob Gardner.
Oh, yeah.
And I had never played jazz in my life, but I read online exactly what you said. The best thing to do is just to go out and meet people. And I did. And this was the guitarist I sat in with. And I can read a chart, but this man was doing nothing but passing chords. I just remember it was crazy. I've never seen anybody play like that. But the thing I did after the show is I made sure I connected with Zach. And, a friendship just happened over time. And to also get back to showing up to the studio, you always, reach out to me, which is crazy, about doing different things. Like, one day, I just sat in and just watched him work in the studio. And then just last week, because I guess I did that for whatever reason, now you trusted me to be your recording engineer.
Sure.
And while it's not the most difficult thing in the world, it's all about building that connection, building that relationship, and also the things you're saying. You told me to show up at 10. I was there at 9:30.
Exactly, yeah.
I had a notebook, pen, ready to take note. I had questions prepared before I got ready to, into the session. So I don't know, everything you just said is it checks out. This man literally is here because of that. So
no, you're really good. You're really good at that stuff, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. That last session you were just mentioning, the client wanted me. I was the engineer on the session, but he wanted me to play guitar too. So I can't be in two places at once.
Yeah.
Well, who am I going to call? Damion was showing an interest in it, and I know he's got the skill, and I was like, hey man, help me out, and that's kind of how it starts, and it snowballs from there. Plus, you're very proactive. I mean, you're good at, look what we're doing right now. We're putting this out there, and that's a good thing. So you got to put yourself out there. That's for sure.
All right, one more question,
yeah.
And then I need all your socials for you to plug it on here.
Sure.
So for the guitarists that are watching, what advice do you have for them to be able to just have the fretboard freedom that you have, where you can just pick up a guitar and instantly start playing it and making it sound pretty? What are the things to focus on for them? See, prime example.
That kind of stuff. Man, that stuff, it's like the bell curve, the parabola.
Yeah.
Parabolic.
I know what you're talking about, yeah. The curve of expectation as well is one thing you'll get at where...
Yeah, there's a meme of it now with the guy in the hood on one side and the beginner on the other side.
Pentatonic and all the scales come back to pentatonic.
Yeah, if you know that meme, that's literally what it is. So at some point in my life, I did dedicate a lot of time to technique. Just being able to play in any key or whatever. And having a thoughtful teacher or mentor can really help too. I've had a lot of great teachers, and they'll say, you need to learn how to do this, and when you're younger, you should, if you like that person's playing, just do what they say and don't question it, because it'll pay off later, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. At least that was my mentality. And so now, because I did that when I was younger, I can kind of turn that side of my brain off and just play music, which is what this is all about. So you should never forget that it is about music. I guess a good example of that would be when I was a kid and a teenager, I was just learning songs because I just really like the songs. We're talking about the Elvis song. I learned the riff from Jailhouse Rock is right, but you use that all the time. That riff has morphed a million times in my hands in a million different situations, all that kind of stuff,
Oh, we did at the cabin. How many different ways we could stretch a 1-4-5?
Yeah, it's all tied together. So that stuff was just cemented in my brain from a very young age. And then later, like I said, getting into jazz, then you develop all the chops and all that stuff. And then on the other side of that bell curve, you just go back to just enjoying music. You got to enjoy what you do. That's for sure. And then if you do that and have kind of like an idea of what you want to sound like, then it's easy to kind of get that out of you without too much effort, you know. So I love, if I've got this acoustic in my hands, I want to hear these beautiful things like that. So, you know, for me, it's just having a vision, knowing what you want to play before you play it, and then trusting that you can do it because you put in the legwork earlier in your life, I guess. And that doesn't mean you should ever stop trying to learn technique and stuff. There's so many things that I still am working on now that I'm just too, you know, bad at to play in public. That's another thing, you know. I'll go for stuff sometimes, but I'll play what I know I can play and kind of leave the other stuff until it evolves in my own mind later.
Yeah. I say play with other people. Oh my God.
Oh man, playing with other people is huge. Like, just at the beginning of this video, we were playing that Tom Waits tune. You know, you can sit on your couch all you want and kind of... But playing with another person, you have to be really cognizant of the time and the feel. Mm-hmm. And that, you can't simulate that on your own. So yeah, getting out, meeting others. This is like the other answer to the other question. Getting out, meeting others, and playing with others is really, really, really important. Do that as early as you can, even if you're scared to do it.
Oh yeah, that's me. Terrified.
Oh yeah, me
terrified. Too. It's always about not being good enough.
Same here. I have crippling.
And that's crazy to hear because you guys have heard him play, and you haven't even heard. He's just scratching the surface of how good you are. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, my stage fright and social anxiety is off the charts bad. But I know that the only solution, the only answer, the only way forward is to just get out there and do it. Yeah. It's the only thing that ever works, you know. So that's the answer.
Well, I appreciate you always pulling me out, trying to make me do that. Because, like, Friday, I mean, I was just like, whatever. Whatever happens, happens. If he's going to invite me out, he's going to invite me out. Screw it.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing that was cool is, you know, Jess didn't take a lot of footage, but some of the footage she did, I was playing stuff that I heard you guys playing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of cool to hear that come out of me, whereas 10 out of 10, if it was just me in this bedroom, that would probably not have come out. Because you and, what's his name,
Evans, yeah.
Evans, both of you all are just incredible. And I was just back there trying to, you know, it's the same thing you're saying, playing to the song, trying not to step on toes, learning where to fill in the space.
Yeah.
And then also, whenever you're like, all right, step out, learning how to do that where, one, it's not competition. It's playing to a song and be like, here's how I play guitar. And I had to get in that mindset because before it, I'm like, I'm getting up stage with Zach, and, you know, it's just, it's these dumb games we play. At least I play in my head.
Oh, I do it too. I'm in my own mind, I'm super competitive, but what I realized early on is that you have to, instead of competing with others outwardly, you have to compete with yourself internally. Yeah. And so I always have a little challenge going on to make things exciting, and it could be as simple as like you were just saying, if there's 3 guitarists on the stage, like there were that night. And I might.
It was awesome.
I might I might just like turn off part of my brain that plays chords and just say, I'm not gonna play. You know, we were playing blues, so instead of 3 guys going, you know, I might let other guys do that, and I'm just the guy that goes every now and then. Yeah. You know, sounds awesome. You're not doing too much. You're not stepping on any toes, but you have to listen to what what other people are doing.
Oh, that was the coolest thing, was listening to what y'all are doing and like what you're saying, just listening, filling up the space appropriately.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, the other side of that coin is sometimes you have to know when to take charge too. So I've also been in other situations where the other people you're playing with are timid, or you can tell that they're unsure of what they should be doing. And in that case, then you have to become the guy that sort of sets the tone. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say we both had that mentality of, oh, I'm gonna wait to see what the other guy plays, and then you say, all right, let's play a blues. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, you're like, just look at each other for a minute. What are you gonna do?
What you got?
So somebody has to do something, obviously. So if you're ever in that situation, you got to know. I guess what I'm saying is read the room. You know, have the awareness to know what to do, when, and how to do it. You know, I call that subject matter expert. You got to be the subject matter expert, the SME, all the time. You know, and even if you're not confident in yourself and your own abilities, or just fake it. Make everybody else believe that you know what you're talking about.
Wear a big hat.
Yeah, exactly. The big hat. You got to get a blues hat, you know, peacocking everybody out there.
Yeah. We have a competition so you can wear the biggest hat. Next one's gonna be a sombrero. We were at a restaurant last night and they had hats. We went to Cracker Barrel.
Oh yeah,
had hats.
they had those hats.
And I was looking at one. I was like, nah, Zach's got one that's bigger. I can't. I gotta find one larger. It's gonna be the goal. Get out there 5-inch.
It's like that old SNL sketch where Will Ferrell has the super tiny cell phone. It's like, how big can the hat get? You know, and they make like a photo montage of all my hats and see the brim like grow out.
Especially the evolution of your hat size. Well, man, thank you so much for coming out and doing this. This has been a blast. I know.
Thanks for having me.
I know my people are gonna love this.
Hopefully,
so, with that in mind, where can they find you?
Well, I'm getting better at promoting myself. So right now, I think the best thing is Instagram, because I'll always put, you know, my gigs and stuff like that on there. And that's just Zach Axe. That's ZACHAXE. That's my handle on Instagram.
Okay.
That's it for now, but I am working on a website and all the other fun stuff. Do people still go to websites anymore?
Well, yeah, maybe. I think for our line of work, it's important.
Yeah, so that'll come in the future, you know.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And if anybody in the Carolinas are watching this, what all services do you offer?
So, man, I like playing guitar for any genre of music, live gigs, studio sessions, whatever. I also am a recording engineer, so that includes, you know, mixing and recording services and all that stuff. And anything related to those two fields I can do, you know, transcribing or arranging, whatever you got, you know.
Sweet.
Anything.
Well, Zach,
hey, man.
thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Now get out of my house. No, just kidding.